Welcome to the Frugalpreneur podcast. I'm your host, Sarah St. John, and my guest today is an entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and known for her book series, 5 Minute Success. Welcome to the show, Karen Briscoe.
Hey, Sarah. Thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to visiting with you and your frugalpreneur community.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it as well. I've been looking on your website and I saw your books and everything. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. If you could give a little bit of background, your story, and how you got into this space.
Well, what's known as a mega real estate agent, which means I sell a lot of houses with a team in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. area. And over 5 years ago, I wrote my first book, Real Estate Success in 5 Minutes a Day. And that came about because I had many people ask me how I achieved a high level of success, particularly when the market crashed in '08. I also lost my business partner that year. She passed away. And so a lot of people would have not been able to survive and then go on to thrive. And I did. And so in the speaking and coaching and training I did with people, I would tell these stories, and the stories were sticky and memorable. And people said, oh, you should write a book. So I did. And I wanted it to be not just another real estate book, because I figured there are probably plenty of those. And I found that not just real estate agents, but salespeople and entrepreneurs, they tend to fall prey into what we call the shiny object squirrel phenomenon. They get distracted very easily. And it's hard for them to stay focused. And that benefits them because they're always off to the next deal. And so that part's good. But the part that oftentimes don't finish training or reading books because they go on to the next one, right? And so I was like, okay, well, what if every day was different? What if in 5 minutes you could get some inspiration and information that will help you transform your business and life, and a takeaway that you can put in action? And what if, you could do it in like what many people know of as the daily reader style, like motivational literature and spiritual literature have done it for years, but this was bringing peanut butter and chocolate together, like bringing a business book together with this other type of literature. And it really resonated with people. I mean, now that I've been on this 5 minute success journey for about 5 years, I've kind of become a time guru. A lot of people ask me questions about productivity and time hacks and that kind of thing. But the longer I've been on this journey, I now have three other books and had my own podcast, a 5 Minute Success podcast, where I do the mic swap and talk to people on the other side.
Are those episodes 5 minutes? I'm just curious.
Each topic is five. So what I found was my publisher actually is the one that said, Karen, every day being different. Yes, I can see why you want that, but there should be some principles, basic principles to 5 minute success. And I literally the whole back of the napkin kind of thing. I pull out a pen and a napkin and I draw these circles like a Venn diagram. And there's four key principles. So the first one is commit to get leads. So whether you're in sales, you're an entrepreneur, if you're a podcaster, your leads are your guests, no matter what kind of profession you're in, you do something to generate business. Some people call it prospecting, some call it lead generation. Then every business owner, entrepreneur, really even nonprofits, everybody does some sort of conversion process, which I call consult to sell. So in the podcasting world, we actually record podcasts, right? And put them out. So the next component is the connect to build and grow, because what happens to many salespeople, entrepreneurs, they're only as good as their next deal, right? I mean, like a podcast, you're only good as your next recording, right? You're on to the next one. But there's things you can do to create a more ongoing, scalable enterprise that leverage and systems and that kind of thing. And then what I found is everybody has these success principles of success thinking, activities, and vision. And that mindset and motivation piece and all that together makes a sweet spot of success. So the podcast is in those 5 minute segments. So each one of those topics is about 5 minutes. Then, between intro and the guest telling their story and finding out how to get a hold of the guest and closing out, we're usually about 30 minutes.
Okay, that makes more sense because I was like, how would you do a whole episode like that in five
I do
minutes?
it in 5 minutes. There are 5 minute podcasts that are very short podcasts. But the idea is you're going to get each of these topics, you're going to get about 5 minutes on them. So actually for salespeople and entrepreneurs that are very busy, you can do it on your run or your walk or your drive to your office if anybody goes to an office anymore, but it's manageable.
That's awesome. I love how it's divided into segments like that. And just the whole concept of 5 minute success because people are just getting busier and busier. People are getting increasingly busy and have less and less time to spend on really anything. I just really love the whole concept. You had mentioned Consult to Sell, which is one of your books. Can you give a little information?
So in, the sales world, but it works in a lot of other spaces as well. But in the sales world, consult to sell is what many people call conversion. So you're working with a customer or a client or a prospect, but they're not fully committed so that there's actually business that's taking place. So when you consult with someone, you're helping to do a needs analysis, find out how you can help them and serve them, and actually take them through the process so that there is either a transaction or some form of business takes place. So it can take a lot of different forms, and some of it is building relationships, and some of it is the skills of the language of sales and negotiations, and some of it is, processes. But it's all of that put together from lead to, closure or some sort of transaction.
And then another book you have is Commit to Get Leads. And these are challenges, I guess, a 66-day challenge. I actually have all these books in my Amazon cart. I have like 100 books in my Amazon cart. I just buy a few at a time. And then when I finish those, I buy a few more. So they're in my cart. And now that I've spoken with you, hopefully
Well, thank
I'll
you.
buy them soon.
The commit to get leads actually comes first. And the reason why I called it commit is because many people in sales and business, they have great ideas and they think about, oh, I'd really like to have this person as a customer or client. But when you commit to doing it, you're going to actually do it. In fact, I loved your Dream 100.
Oh,
I saw that in your email.
mhm,
So you've put out this commitment, right, to meet these people, and you are taking action and steps to make those connections and make those contacts. I'm thinking.
mhm,
So every guest that you invite or every person who sees your email, they know who your ideal customer is,
mhm,
right? So you're doing a form of lead generation. You're lead generating for guests on your podcast. So whatever business you're in, I mean, I'm in real estate, so I'm looking for people that are thinking about buying and selling houses, and it's a commitment. And it's what happens to many people is they get real busy. They'll get a few leads or they'll get some customers to work with, and then they get real busy and then they stop doing the activities, and then the pipeline dries up, and then they wake up and they go, oh my gosh, I need to get busy again. The 66-day challenge, you brought that up. So back to being kind of a time guru and habit guru, because a lot of my, teaching and training and my success is based on building good, solid habits. And one of the things that I found is that many people stop too soon, right? They get started and they have a commitment, but they don't have enough commitment to actually build a habit. And that's where the 66-day challenge came in. There's some research, there's a lot of research on habit formation, but Charles Duhigg, who wrote The Power of Habit, he's probably the best, one of the best known habit researchers. And he cites a study where they found 66 days it creates what they call automaticity. So that means that it becomes a habit that you don't have to think about anymore. Like brush your teeth is the best example. So, and the reason why they found this is for most people, the first 3 weeks or 21 days, they're very excited about their new habit. They are very evangelistic about it. They're like telling everybody. So, like when Pelotons, everybody was getting a Peloton, like they told the whole world, right? Or, they're starting a new diet or something. And they're very excited and they're very energized about it. The next 3 weeks to 21 days, most people start to evaluate whether they really want to do it anymore. That's where the Peloton starts being the place where you hang your clothes at the end of the night. And that is really a key aspect to habit formation because the process of building habits that you want for your life, right? So, because truly, if you want to be successful in any kind of sales or entrepreneurship, this is a life thing, right? I mean, it's not like just do it for 21 days and you're going to be set. You have to do it over and over again. So the idea is that I'm sure you've heard of Seth Godin and the dip. So when you get to that dip, you evaluate, well, is this something I really want in my life? Is it worth powering through the dip as you're evaluating it? And when you power through, that generally the next 21 days, the kind of the balance of the 66 days, you start to experience the benefits of it. And when people start to experience benefits of their habit, then they want to do more. And when you want to do more, then you're more likely to keep it in place. And so that's why the 66-day challenge, because what I found with a lot of people, they're like, I just need to jumpstart. I just need to do something to get me going. So I was like, okay, that's where these 66-day challenges came in.
The 21 days that you always hear about, I guess that's just to form the habit, but then the remaining days of the 66 is to start seeing the outcome or benefits.
Yes, most people, once they get, oftentimes when they get through, that's why most diets, most New Year's resolutions don't make it to the end of January, right? Because most people go through all those phases. They start out real excited, then they go through this dip, and they like, if there's two kind of people. One group of people, they power through the dip and they get to the other side and they keep going. The other group, that's when they stop, right? So that's why the 21 days, what they found is that's what gets people started on a habit. But what keeps them going through is that going for 66 days. But some habits take longer. I'm not saying that it's a magical time, but it is found to be, and it's catchy, right? So it's more memorable. People again will commit to 66 days because it's doable. They can see how they can do that.
Route 66 is what it reminds me of.
Yes, that's actually part of what brought the whole idea. And I was like, because I was hearing from people, they're like, I love your book and it really is impacting me because I'm remembering principles when I'm actually needing to remember them. It's such a big book. And I'm like, well, why do you care? It's only one page a day. But they were like fixated on the size of the book. And also, some people wanted to focus. They wanted to like focus on lead generation. They wanted to focus on conversion
Mhm.
skills.
What are some of the best ways to get leads? I know you had mentioned podcasting and maybe guests can become a lead. And obviously, I would imagine podcast listeners as well. But what are some other ways?
Most people are going to want to work with people they know, like, and trust. And that's one of the beautiful things about your Dream 100, right? Because you are putting out there the people that you want to have on your podcast. And so then when you have other people that maybe know one of them, they're more likely to make a connection. And that's true in really any kind of sales or any kind of endeavor. I mean, think about it. If you're even looking for someone where to go to dinner or where to get your car fixed or whatever, that's why a lot of these platforms like Nextdoor and those people want to Yahoo. I mean, think about Yelp. People want to hear what other people's experience are and they want to make those connections. So your sphere of influence, your SOI, is going to be your strongest connection, or, well, actually, that leads to what's called the strength of weak ties. So there's been a lot of research, and this is why I'm sure you've heard of the book and the movie 6 Degrees of Separation, but they found that the next couple of layers out are actually your strongest likelihood to be an ideal client because they are a referral from a friend of a friend. And they're more likely to refer a friend. Sometimes people, even though they want to work with people they know, like, and trust, sometimes people are hesitant about working with friends, but they will refer a friend to a friend. They're more likely to refer. So that start with your sphere of influence. And even if they don't work with you, don't take that personally. You still want them to know what you do so that then maybe they know somebody who would be a good fit.
In that Dream 100, I forget who originally started, but then I think Russell Brunson adopted it. And then I don't know if you're familiar with the Hustle and Flowchart podcast, but those guys, they do it in their email signature. That's where I got the idea.
Oh, well, I like your idea. Maybe I'll do a Dream 66.
Oh, that would be a good idea. Well, and then you also have on your
Yeah.
consult to sell that's 77. So you could do a Dream 77.
Well, there's all different ways. I think it's being memorable,
Mhm.
right? They're more likely to refer you or to think of you when they have that situation where they could make a connection. Just old fashioned way of reaching out. I mean, I've had, you talking about podcasting. I mean, I've been a little bit of a stalker. Like, I remember, so you have Hal Elrod on your Dream 100.
Mhm.
And I had a friend and a fellow realtor and podcaster and author. And I knew he knew Hal. And I said, will you introduce me to Hal? Several times they made an email introduction. And I was like, I still haven't been able to talk to Hal. And he goes, well, you need to go to his event.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I do. So it turned out I knew somebody who knew him that was doing an event in our area. And so I called her and I said, I want to meet Hal. And she said, well, you got to get there really early in the
Uh,
morning. So I was like, okay, how early will Hal be there? And she told me, and I was like, that's early. So this is before I personally took on the
mhm,
Miracle Morning. But then I met Hal at that event and I asked him to endorse my book. And he said, yes. And he said, but I want you to come to my big event in December in San Diego. So that is a great way as well, because people are going to have more respect for people who reach out to them, who have read their books, who do subscribe to their podcast, who are part of their community and seek to add value to them
mhm,
and not just ask them to do something for you. So that's another way how I had Gretchen
mhm,
Rubin as a guest. She wrote The Happiness Project, and I'm a little bit of a groupie. I love her books, and one of her books I attribute to why I was able to write my book. And so I wanted to meet her. And so she had actually come to our area to do a speaking thing, and they had a special event to meet the author before. He paid a little bit more money, but I was like, well, that's worth it if I get to meet her.
mhm.
And I went up there and I did the ask. So when it was time to do the photo shoot with the author, I said, Gretchen, I have a podcast. Will you be a guest? I made the ask and she said yes. And so her assistant or somebody said, give me your car and we'll make the connection. And then for some reason that didn't work.
Mm.
So I knew her sister through Instagram. So I started Instagramming, said I'd been there. Gretchen had said, and so all of a sudden, Gretchen contacted me and said she'd be a guest. And so I had her. So sometimes it just takes a little bit of
Mhm.
creativity and some ingenuity and some resourcefulness.
Yeah, actually, I'm assuming you're familiar with Pat Flynn.
Yes, of course.
So I've come up with some different creative ways. I mean, most of the time, most of my guests, I just have to send an email or contact them through some kind of website form or something, and it's fine. But with the bigger ones, it's, for example, with Pat Flynn, the only place I could really contact him was through a contact form, and I never heard back. I contacted like 2 or 3 times over the course of a year or something because he has a team, and I'm sure they're gatekeepers and filter. Then I joined. He recently came out with SPI Pro or Smart Passive Income Pro, and it's his community. It's like $49 a month,
Yeah.
and I joined it not for the intention of trying to get him on my show, but once I was in the community, and he uses a platform called Circle. So it's not like a Facebook group, it's some other third party platform. And I saw that you could direct message people. So I direct messaged him and asked if he'd be on the show. I kind of explained what it was about or gave him a link to it. And he responded the same day and said, yeah, sure. I had sent him a link with the booking and he went ahead and scheduled. If you go to someone's event or you join their paid community or something like that, where you're more likely to be able to even get access to them or meet them or whatever, communicate, then I think you're much more likely to have them on your show. So have you had Hal Elrod on your show?
Yes, Hal's actually been a guest several
Oh,
times. He's become a good friend. I saw he was on your list, but he was really my first
mhm,
big guest. And that was why it was a real lesson for me and a learning opportunity. But then over time became a great friend of his and huge fan. And I was in his mastermind for a number of years. He quote unquote retired from masterminding right before COVID hit. And at the time, we were all like, why are you doing this, Hal? I mean, we knew he had health concerns, but then we look back and we go, wow, that was really, he must have known something we all didn't know, that the world was going to shut down. But I think he's bringing back in a new format, a Miracle Morning retreat. He's getting back out there.
yeah, he has quite the story, so I'd love to get him on sometime and about 100 other people. So once you get leads, what are the
Yeah.
steps to close, make a sale, or have them become a client of yours? What are the best ways to go about that once you have the lead?
It's just interesting because it really is the what we just talked about, right? Not to be stalking. I mean, I'm not encouraging anybody to be stalking, but to stay consistently persistent. So the ideas and pretty persistent in ways that are going to be meaningful for that person and to provide things that are of value. So the more you can provide value to somebody, then the more likely you are to convert them to want to work with you. And in the real estate space, for me, what I provide is market knowledge. In the podcasting space, what I offer is a community of listeners with several 100,000 downloads and an email list of 30,000 people. And so those things, and I also think that also offers value is the recognition of other people that have been guests or clients, right? Because that social proof is what converts a lot of people. Different people resonate with different needs. Some people need somebody who's able to really provide a lot of data and information and help you make decision based on that. Some people, they're much more decisive people and they are results. So they want to see the results. And some people are more people and they want more relationship and connection. And they want to know, who do you know and who you had and whatever. And some people are more stability conscious. They want to know that you're going to take care of them, that you're going to meet their needs. So part of the sales process or the conversion process is also learning how you can best serve them. Because if you are serving their needs, then there really isn't anything to
Mhm.
sell, right? Because people are going to then, a lot of sales, you really can't make somebody do
Mhm.
something, right? I mean, they're going to do it. You can't make somebody come be a guest on the podcast, right? I mean, you send the invitation, but they have to show up. And if they don't, I mean, you didn't make a sale, right? You didn't. So it's the same with a lot. So what you want to do is you want to create that environment. And the way you create that environment of trust is by taking them through whatever it is that they need to feel comfortable or confident or good about going forward
Mhm.
in the process. And then the rest of it, just sometimes it's two steps forward and one step backwards. So those skills and knowledge and ability can be learned for any profession or any sales or entrepreneur, but the skills of knowing how to help people through that is the one that I think is the most valuable, because that's the other thing I discovered about going from real estate sales to podcasting. And I don't know what you did before podcasting, but I was like, oh my gosh, so many of these skills are transferable, right? The same skill of lead generating to get customers and clients for real estate works for lead generating to get guests for podcasts and to be a guest on other podcasts, right?
Mhm. So we've talked a little bit about how to get a lead, how to turn that lead into a sale or a client or a customer. And then what tips would you have on keeping that customer or client?
Well, that's the connect to build and grow. And that is a really good point, because this is what happens to most people in sales is they get a lead, they get a customer client, they get it through the process, business happens on the other end, and then they go on and do the next one. And they're only as good as their next deal. They're literally living a life on a hamster wheel. So the principle of connect to build and grow, that is where you create scale and leverage and systems. So one of the best ways to create scale to have some sort of contact relationship management system or software or process to stay connected or in touch. So you want to stay relevant in front of people in a meaningful way so they don't unsubscribe. Continue to add value. You want to build on that. Each one should bring you one, right? I mean, in a way, it's kind of like, I think you're doing that again with your Dream 100 is a great example, right? You're going, reaching out to you about being a guest, but who do you know in this list of 100? So building that so that, that their referral source is a continuous stream of people. Because if you're coming from a referral, you're more likely to convert that lead. There's sales statistics that if you have 100 random people that you make contact with, 10 will talk to you, 3 will do something meaningful with you, and 1 will convert. So it's basically, if you can 10x that, do a Grant Cardone and 10x it. So the way you 10x that is, instead of 100 random people, you go to the 10 people that will already talk to you because they know you. So 3 will then do something meaningful and 1 will convert.
Mhm.
So you can 10x your business by just those couple of
Mhm.
principles. One, by building some sort of ongoing relationship system to stay in touch with them, and the other, and add value continuously. And then the other one is to 10x your contacting. And then automate it, right? I mean, this is classic Tim Ferriss 4-hour work week, right? I mean, the audit, anything that can be automated should be automated, or should have somebody else if it's not your highest best use. So in real estate, we always want land to be at its highest and best use. So I always think of myself, I mean, I'm my best asset. I mean, Warren Buffett said that you are your greatest asset. So my ability to produce and to create value and add value is my greatest asset. So I want to use that in the areas where I can make the biggest contribution, and to take the things that are not in that highest and best use space and have it be done by someone else or automated or virtual assistant or whatever is a great way to connect and build and grow an ongoing enterprise as well.
We've mentioned so many books. I'm gonna put a link to all these different books we've talked about in the show notes just so people know what we're talking about and can check them out. You had mentioned in the beginning about you called it shiny object squirrel
Oh, shiny object squirrel syndrome. You
well,
haven't
I've
heard
heard
of
of
that?
shiny
Yeah,
object
squirrel.
syndrome. I haven't heard of the squirrel part.
Well, it's like a dog. It sees a squirrel and it's just like, no matter what the dog was doing, they go after the
Oh, yeah.
squirrel. Even if the squirrel is sending them in a direction they shouldn't be
Mhm.
going, they can't help themselves. We call that the squirrel phenomenon.
I think most entrepreneurs have that shiny object syndrome. I know I have before. And the first step in getting rid of that is, of course, to recognize it when it's happening. But after that, what kind of tips would you have on trying to avoid acting upon a shiny object syndrome and having your hand in like 10 different things that really aren't going to end up moving the needle anyway?
Well, I actually am going to do a little bit of a counter. I actually think that is one of the strengths of the salesperson entrepreneur. So, the idea for me is to find ways to use it to your advantage or to your benefit. But then I would also say, along the same lines, is focus on what you want more of because what you focus on expands. Sometimes a shiny object comes up with a great idea, right? So some people, myself included, I feel like I had that whole epiphany happen to me. I went down the trajectory and I couldn't see what was going to happen with it, but I was like, this is where I'm going to go. So some of it is good. That's where creativity comes from and curiosity. And those are all great things. So I am not here to advocate people stop doing that. But what I want to encourage people to focus on is the idea that their energy is their greatest. It's not time, it's energy. Okay. So energy is your fundamental currency of high performance. So what you want to do is you want to protect or to ensure that you have the highest level of energy. And what happens a lot of times with people is that the shiny object squirrel is distracting and it takes away from their energy and the things they should be focusing on. So those, yes, I would say let's get those squirrels and those shiny objects out of your space because those are not going to benefit you in the long run. So the thing that I found is many people have used time as kind of this cop out thing, like they don't have enough time and this whole busy and all of that. There's an old quote by Lao Tzu that says, time is a created thing. To say I don't have time is like saying I don't want to. So when people say that they don't have time to do something like creative work or something that would be meaningful for them, there's probably something else going on. And so I would suggest that if you're constantly being distracted by things that aren't meaningful for you, figure out why. Because maybe you're using that as a way to, some people do it as kind of a scapegoat method, like, okay, I know all this stuff's going on and I don't really want to do it, but I can't figure out how to get out of it. That's where a good coaching or mentor or accountability group or something might help you see some things that you don't see that can help you get past that. So I guess I would look to see what it is, this thing that's distracting or this thing that's shiny object, your squirrel. And if they're constantly, because shiny object is, oh, this looks better over here instead of what I'm doing right now. And squirrel is just a total like taking off in another direction. You're not thinking about it. You're just like a dog. You're just running after the squirrel. So why, if they happen over and over again, they're not benefiting you, then maybe do a little bit discovery and figure out why it keeps happening. But the parts that are good, I keep those because that's where a lot of inventions and creativity and ideas happen, right? It's those moments where you're like, I'm sure you had that moment when you came up with the idea of the podcast, the Frugalpreneur.
I had spent like 10 years probably, actually more than that, trying this, that, and the other thing, a bunch of different online business models. But yeah, it wasn't until I came across podcasting that I think once you find that thing, you know. So I don't really have so much a problem anymore with shiny object syndrome since I found my thing. But beforehand, I had that problem. And you had mentioned that sometimes it's a good thing because the greatest inventions can come out of it. And that reminds me again of Pat Flynn, where he said that he's always thinking of these new ideas. So he'll dedicate just 20% of his time to these new kind of shiny object syndrome type of ideas, and 80% of his time on his actual current business. And it was, I don't know if you know of the Switch Pod, but it's like this physical product he created that holds your camera or whatever. Apparently, that was an invention he created during that 20% of time that he could spend working on whatever. So, yeah, you just never know.
Well, that's actually a great strategy because sometimes people think inspiration happens just in the shower or whatever. But sometimes inspiration happens when you're purposeful about it because you leave the space for creativity to happen. Most people overbook themselves. It would be like writing a book or trying to read a book where the print went all the way to the edges. Most people live their lives like that. And so I would agree with that. If you're feeling like there's no space for you to have any energy or time for creativity or to figure out your next, that probably the first place to start is to create some space for that to happen. So I think that's
Mhm.
brilliant. But that's where ideas come from. That's where the future is, right? Because I think it was Einstein that says imagination is more important than
Mm.
knowledge because knowledge is already known and imagination is creating new. And if you think about just the way the world has changed so much, that's where it's going.
Mhm.
You want to live into that, or I do. I like the idea that there's more to discover.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that quote. That's a good one. I need to frame that or something. I like that. Well, I really appreciate your time today. I think we went over a lot, and I know people can find you at 5minutesuccess.com. That's five, the number. I'll also have show notes with the various things we talked about at thesarahstjohn.com/Karen Briscoe. And that's KarenBriscoe. And was there anything else that you wanted to leave the audience with that we hadn't already talked about?
Well, Sarah, I appreciate having the opportunity to speak to the frugalpreneurs and my community successpreneurs. And if I can do it, you can too.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time today. Be sure to grab your free copy of my list of 27 tools, resources, and software programs I use to run my businesses on a tight budget. You can get it at thesarahstjohn.com/27 tools. That's TheSarahStJohn.com/27 tools.